Good afternoon to you. It is 5:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Tom Fitton will join us 5:30 today. The president of Judicial Watch. He'll react to the news that Jack Smith is set to indict and arrest the 45th president of the United States and Joe Biden's top political opponent yet again. More abuse of our justice system to meddle in our elections. Tom Fitton reacts. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. New York Post headline out in the last hour here by the great Stephen Nelson, excellent White House correspondent for the New York Post, with a byline here, Josh Christensen on the byline. FBI told Hunter Biden investigator to duck committee questions. Bombshell letter shows. Dateline Washington. The FBI warned a supervisory agent who investigated Hunter Biden that he was expected to decline to respond to House Oversight Committee questions about the ongoing case involving the first son. A bombshell letter obtained by the New York Post shows. FBI General Counsel Jason Jones sent the letter Sunday afternoon. That's this past Sunday. Just hours before the agent was set to testify, even though a source tells the Post that the FBI knew of a scheduled Monday deposition for several days. Quote, the department expects that you will decline to respond to questions seeking non-public information, likely covered by one or more components of executive privilege or other significant confidentiality interests. In particular, information about deliberations or ongoing investigative activity in law enforcement matters, Jones wrote. You should instead refer such questions to the FBI's Office of Congressional Affairs, the FBI lawyer says. Consistent with longstanding practice, this will afford the department the full opportunity to consider particular questions and possible accommodations that may fulfill the committee's legitimate need for information while protecting executive branch confidentiality interests. So ahead of an FBI whistleblower speaking to Congress yesterday for some length of time, the FBI attempted to obstruct that whistleblower's testimony, telling him he will not share information that they don't want him to. The FBI agent, the New York Post reports, proceeded to confirm key details of the probe that were previously shared by two IRS agents, including that Hunter's legal team was tipped off about a planned approach to interview him in December of 2020 about his failure to pay millions in taxes on foreign income, spoiling the opportunity. So this FBI special agent, he sits before Congress yesterday behind closed doors and says, yeah, the IRS whistleblowers are correct. Gary Shapley, Mr. X, who, by the way, are testifying tomorrow in public. I guess we'll find out the identity of Mr. X beginning tomorrow. I assume they're not going to cover him in a veil and give him a voice modulator or something and call him Mr. X throughout. I imagine you only see a shadow of a human. Now, I think we're going to get a full reveal tomorrow. But these are the top two IRS investigators on the Hunter Biden case who are saying, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs. America, your justice system is corrupt and it's been corrupted on behalf of the Biden family. In all of our decades of service, we have never seen an investigation this corrupted by partisan interests to protect the Bidens. And so now you have an FBI agent confirming this very thing. A whistleblower confirming this very thing from the Federal Bureau of Investigation to the Republicans who are actually investigating this in Congress. That Hunter Biden's team was tipped off to a December 2020 plan to have investigators interview him. And that FBI headquarters called ahead to the Secret Service the night before and said, hey, just so you know, we're coming tomorrow. And what does the Secret Service do? By this point, it's December of 2020. Joe Biden declared the victor in the election. And the Secret Service is now protecting the president-elect's family, to include Hunter Biden. Now Hunter Biden and his team are tipped off to the fact that the FBI is coming the next day. And not only is Hunter Biden's team tipped off, the people around him, all of his various business associates across the country, everybody that the FBI wanted to speak to, everybody that the IRS investigators wanted to speak to, the people who were actually trying to do the work of conducting this investigation. All of those people were tipped off to this. And so by the time the actual event rolls around the next day, everybody clams up except for one person, Rob Walker, who apparently didn't get the memo and gives something of a damning recitation of events to the investigators. Of course, that goes nowhere as the United States Department of Justice seeks to cover up for the Bidens. But everybody else clammed up. They all had advance notice that this was coming. And think about the contrast here. Do you remember James Comey bragging about springing a trap on General Flynn in the White House? Do you remember this? What kind of advance notice did they give to General Flynn that the conversation he was about to have with FBI agents that he believed were his colleagues inside of the Trump administration? He believed that these were just FBI agents he was speaking with. And then they turned that into a criminal prosecution of him, Peter Strzok and company. James Comey thought they would catch him during the chaos of the arrival at the White House. He was sinister about this publicly, bragging about how they were able to catch Mike Flynn and then turn his life upside down, make it a living hell. Meanwhile, the FBI was alerting Hunter's team well in advance of conversations with Hunter that you have investigators on the way. Maybe you'd like to get ready for it. And so everybody clams up. So if you're looking for more evidence of disparate justice in the country. Jones referred to the Hunter Biden case as ongoing in his letter. That's the FBI counsel, using similar wording to Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss, which congressional Republicans fear is intended to hinder their demands for records and testimony. This would go back to what I was saying the second we saw this. Remember, David Weiss, the U.S. Attorney for Delaware, when he came out and he said, yep, we've got a plea agreement with Hunter Biden. He's going to plead to 2 misdemeanor charges on being late on his taxes to the tune of millions of dollars. Can you imagine? Misdemeanor. Would you have misdemeanor charges if you were late on your taxes for $2 million? I don't think so. That wouldn't happen for you. Sorry, unless you're Hunter Biden. And Hunter, welcome to the audience. But anybody else, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. And then no consequences for the gun charge. The diversion agreement on the gun charge. No felony. You're fine. Keep your nose clean. Don't snort any cocaine. And if you have cocaine, stuff it into a locker at the White House, and the Secret Service will take care of that. They'll make that issue go away. That, by the way, let me just pause on that for a moment because I hadn't really contemplated that. If it was proven to be Hunter Biden's cocaine, the felony charge would have come through. The gun, right? The whole point of the diversion agreement is that he not get in trouble with the law. But if the cocaine charge came through, if the drug charge came through, he would have been busted and hit with a felony charge for the gun, for lying to the FBI on that gun background check form. So all the more reason to bury that story if it was Hunter's coke. Anyway, back to this. So David Weiss comes out and says in that very same statement, yeah, we've reached an agreement here and the investigation continues. What do you mean the investigation continues? What kind of arrangement is this? Why would Hunter Biden's lawyers agree to plead guilty and then as a part of the agreement allow the investigation to continue? That doesn't even make any sense. Unless, of course, the whole reason the investigation is staying open is to keep information from Congress and from the American people. So that's what these congressional Republicans fear is actually happening. Hunter Biden's legal team say that they believe their client's legal exposure is over. Oh, how about that? After he reached a probation-only plea deal last month on 2 misdemeanor tax fraud charges and a gun possession felony that will be expunged following probation. Quote, according to information provided to you by the committee is seeking information about an individual ongoing criminal investigation and prosecution, said Jones. Specifically, the committee has stated an interest in what the committee has described to you as certain events that took place in December of 2020 as a part of this investigation. As the department recently emphasized when affirming that U.S. Attorney David Weiss will appear before the House Committee on the Judiciary at an appropriate time, consistent with the law and department policy, the department's longstanding policy is to seek, wherever possible, to provide information about closed rather than open matters. What a scam. What a scam. So they reach a deal with Hunter. They charge him, and he pleads guilty, the 2 misdemeanors, nothing with the gun, and that's it. And then they say, but for convenience sake, the investigation's still open, and we can't provide any more information. And you, FBI whistleblower, better not provide information to Congress. You are hereby ordered to keep your damn mouth shut. That's the FBI's position this week in a letter obtained by the New York Post. Now, that FBI agent did not keep his mouth shut. He spoke up. That former FBI supervisory special agent, who was assigned to the Hunter Biden criminal investigation, confirmed several key aspects of the IRS whistleblower testimony from June. That's according to James Comer, who announced this yesterday. The former FBI agent saying that the Biden family and the Secret Service were tipped off about an interview the FBI planned to have with Hunter in December of 2020. Biden entered a plea deal in late June, as you know. I'm reading from the Daily Caller's coverage here. The investigation into Hunter Biden was slow-walked, IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley said originally. He said that the way that this investigation was conducted was, quote, way outside the norm. The former agent also said that the FBI was told not to approach Hunter Biden until he told them he was ready to give the interview, which, guess what? He never did. Hunter never was ready. So the interview was never conducted. Is that a privilege you would be afforded? Hey, the FBI's calling. They said they're happy to do an interview whenever you're available, so just let us know when you're free. Just let us know. Did that work for Mark Houck? Did that arrangement work for Mark Houck? You remember him? The pro-life father who the FBI raided. Remember the FBI showed up, guns drawn at his house and his wife and his kids? A guy who had agreed he would work with the feds if they so chose. They wanted, if they wanted him to come in voluntarily, he would do that very thing, right? Did they extend him the privilege that they give to Hunter Biden? They said, hey, whenever you're ready to do an interview, that's fine. You can do an interview. Hunter never took him up on it. Nah, sorry, no thanks. And that's it. That's it. Mark Houck, man who volunteers. He says, I'll talk to them. The same thing happened to everybody around Trump. I'll talk to them. Yeah, I'll go meet with them. Didn't matter. You got raids. Trump himself. Yeah. Come on over. Come on in. Anything you guys need. Remember when the FBI showed up at Mar-a-Lago? And they were like, hey, put a lock on that door. They're like, yeah. Okay, and anything else you need, you let us know. And then what did the FBI do? They raided Mar-a-Lago. Hunter Biden, they send him a calendar invite. Hey, let us know if this is a good date for you. And Hunter, nothing. And then they've got people on the inside who are tipping off the whole Hunter Biden family. Like, hey, here comes an interview. Hey, that storage unit you got, we're going to come take a look at it, so you may want to know about that. And then they get time to clean up the storage unit. So corruption all the way through. And now we have, how many people do we have confirming this? You've got the FD 1023 form alleging the bribery. You've got Tony Bobolinsky, who said it on the record. You've got Gal Luft, who's on the run for his life right now from the United States, saying he's got the goods on this because he was also paid by that Chinese energy company. He knows exactly how the Biden family was being paid. You have whistleblowers from inside the government. You have Gary Shapley. You have Mr. X. You have the FBI agent. How much more do you need on this guy? And today, as this news is coming out, as yet another person who is honoring his oath to the Constitution steps forward to say, hey, I've seen something disgusting. What do we learn? We learn that Jack Smith and the Biden administration are pursuing yet another arrest of Joe Biden's political opponent, Donald Trump. Coincidence? Come on. By now, you know there is a fake admiral who also happens to be a fake woman by the name of Rachel Levine, serving in the Department of Health and Human Services. What is happening in our country? This is truly idiocracy. Rachel, I believe it's Richard, right? That's his real name? Richard Levine. Here's Richard Levine suggesting that some children are born in the wrong bodies, and then as a result, they go through the, quote, wrong puberty.
What would you say to folks who think that they're being reasonable by saying, why can't children just wait till they're 18?
Adolescence is hard and puberty is hard. What if you're going through the wrong puberty? What if you inside...
Puberty is not war. What is he talking about? Puberty is hard. Therefore, you should trans your kid?
What if you're going through the wrong puberty? What if you inside feel that you are female, but now you're going through a male puberty?
This is moronic. You can't go through an alternate puberty. A boy is not going to all of a sudden go through a girl's puberty and vice versa. That is not going to happen in any scenario. There is no medical intervention that makes that happen. There's no fairy dust you sprinkle on somebody that makes that happen. Nothing. This is just a lie. Instead, all you're doing is maiming children. And in fact, here's a cut of somebody who knew that way back in 2019, 4 years ago, by the name of Richard Levine.
You know, my transition was very different because for many reasons, professional and mostly personal reasons, I transitioned over 10 years. Okay? Most people don't take that long to transition. First of all, young people are not willing to do that anymore. And, you know, I mean, I don't know if I was 15 now, I don't know if I would have taken so long, but again, when I was 15, what were you going to say and who would you tell and how would you possibly express that? But so the language started about, you know, and that was now 20 years ago when I kind of started this journey. And it was starting to become more in culture in the internet and support groups, etc. So I took a long time. I don't regret any of that. But I have no regrets because if I transitioned when I was young and I wouldn't have my children. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine a life without my children. And so every experience led me to here.
I can't imagine a life without my children, he says. I wouldn't have my children if I was maimed when I was young, if I was castrated when I was young. So why would you do that to kids now? How cruel of you. And the reality is that you have people in the Biden administration who took a mentally ill person and gave him a job in the Department of Health and Human Services. And that's how you can end up with two audio cuts that are so diametrically opposed to one another. One in which he says, I'm glad this didn't happen to me when I was young. I wouldn't have kids. And I love my kids. And now he's out there saying that kids can go through alternate puberties. It's completely demented. This should have never been allowed to happen. It's 5:29. Well, good afternoon to you. 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. CNN very excited today as tyranny continues its pursuit of Donald Trump.
And just one last point. Jack Smith, remember when the classified documents target letter, when Trump announced that, there was a lot of commentary. Is Jack Smith making a mistake here? Is he leaving this all to Donald Trump? And then they released the indictment and we all said, wow, we read it, we saw the documentation, we saw the level of detail. Jack Smith going to Subway today is a message to Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump tries to intimidate people. He tries to bully people. He tries to scare you away. That was Jack Smith with no words and a simple $5 sub in his hand saying, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, the imagery was intentional and spoke volumes.
It really is.
Yeah. What an amazing moment in American history. Boy, Subway just keeps on popping up in all of these scandals, doesn't it? And they always are predicated on lies. For more on this, let's turn to the great Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch and the author of A Republic Under Assault. Tom, good to have you with us today.
Hey, good to be with you again, Vince. Thanks for having me.
As you know, the real story is about how Jack Smith was sending a message by going to Subway today. But tell us, what's your takeaway today as we find out that Jack Smith is pursuing Donald Trump yet again with more indictments?
Well, it really completes the politicization of the Justice Department's prosecutorial powers. This grand jury, and I witnessed it firsthand, is going out there to try to destroy the Republican Party. They've been investigating their fundraising operation, investigating state elected officials, citizens participating in the process as they understood they could under the First Amendment, state and federal law related to disputing an election. And by suggesting that the then President of the United States, then candidate for the president, could not explore, comment, and talk about ways to dispute an election, it's just beyond me that any honest prosecutor could think that's appropriate. But of course, this is partisan. You know, I testified to the grand jury. They came in, the prosecutors for Jack Smith's team, and I was a witness. And they just argued with me for 3 hours on these issues about election disputes. And, you know, I was commenting earlier today, Vince, it was like being on Twitter all day dealing with left-wing reply guys.
Yeah.
There was nothing serious about this. And I thought, why am I being questioned on First Amendment activity? The First Amendment's more than about free speech. It's about freedom of association and, as importantly, the right to petition your government. And they want to jail Republicans for petitioning their government over an election dispute that election disputes that happen time and time again in American history, and for the first time in history, they're trying to jail people for doing it in the run-up to another presidential election.
But to believe that Donald Trump had led some sort of illegal coup, the events that actually took place in America have to be completely ignored. Donald Trump left on Inauguration Day in 2021. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He ceded control of the government to the incoming president of the United States. The peaceful transfer of power occurred yet again in the United States of America. You have to ignore all of that in order to build some sort of case that Donald Trump did something illegal, including that he called on people to go to the Capitol peacefully on January 6th and patriotically make their voices heard. You have to ignore literally the evidence.
And you'd have to criminalize speech. I mean, essentially what Trump was doing was figuring out ways to dispute the election, debating it. There was this debate about alternative slates of electors.
Yeah.
There were debates about what could happen in Congress. Certainly, Vice President Pence, he wasn't sure, evidently, what he was going to do till the day of January 6th. So the point is, they've changed the law after that to further clarify things,
right,
in terms of electoral challenges, which suggests that the original law had all sorts of questions about how it applied and how it should be analyzed. And of course, Democrats did this very same thing in 1960 in the John Kennedy contest, where you had an alternative slate of electors, for instance, in Hawaii, that were all ready to go. But, you know, it's different rules for Trump. And I tell you, one way to test whether something's illicit in terms of a prosecution is this a novel application and a revolutionary approach to enforcing the law? Are they indicting and criminalize something for the first time in history?
Yes.
And that's happened with Trump time and time again by Democratic politicians in multiple jurisdictions. Remember, Jack Smith equals Alvin Bragg equals the Attorney General of Michigan, who's just indicted a bunch of septuagenarians for daring to engage in again, this dispute about the election to the Democrats in Fulton County, Georgia.
Also,
they were all part of a piece.
Also, they are allowing broad categories of crimes to go unindicted. So they're not going after actual criminals in so many places in America. If you're looking for evidence of that, look no further than what's happening in Washington, D.C., where last year over 2/3 of arrests resulted in no prosecutions because the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, refused to go after the people who were actually arrested for committing crimes in the streets of D.C. Meanwhile, he has used his time to try and pursue thousands of Americans who were either in, around, or knew someone who went to the Capitol on January 6th in 2021, regardless of whether they committed any act of violence whatsoever. So, or destruction of property whatsoever. There is no even standard of justice here. It's just corrupt through and through. So you talk about them going after Trump for novel reasons. They're not even going after criminals for legitimate reasons.
No, and of course, when you're a leftist in government, you've got an agenda you're pursuing, and obviously the soft on crime approach is part of that. To me, it's perfectly consistent. They're not there to mete out justice and protect the public safety. They're there to achieve political goals, and doing so, they've changed. You know, there have been political prosecutions by the Justice Department in the past, but never has it been so naked. Never has it been so brazen. And I tell you, if we've crossed this Rubicon, I think we've actually not only crossed it, we're in undiscovered country. And I hope there's going back, because if the new rule is no matter who gets into office, they get to jail their opponents, both past and current. We're no better than Putin's Moscow or Xi's Beijing or any of these other countries we're supposed to denounce every 6 days.
Well, that's funny because I'm hearing from presidential historian Michael Beschloss right now that it's Donald Trump who's the fascist. That if Trump were to be elected, he's promising to fire federal employees, and therefore he would be a dictator. I mean, this is a serious case of projection going on here.
Well, this president of the United States is trying to jail his predecessor and his current opponent in the presidential campaign. It's never happened before. And he's being, and as I said, the charges are pretextual, novel applications of the law, which suggest they're not being made in good faith. And I'm being charitable here. This is a hijacking of our justice system by political operatives in the Justice Department. The veil's been lifted, and I tell you, members of Congress who continue to pretend this isn't a big deal, continue to fund the Justice Department and these criminal operations, and I don't mean operations targeting criminals, I mean government operations that are criminal given their violations of the civil rights of Trump and other Americans. There are a lot of folks who need to be held accountable here, and Republicans need to get their act together and decide whether or not they're going to let their party be destroyed by the federal government.
Matt Gaetz made an announcement earlier today to the point that you're talking about. Here's Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz on defunding Jack Smith.
In the coming hours, the coming days, I will be introducing legislation under my name in the House of Representatives as a freestanding bill to defund the Jack Smith investigation. And one reason why is the election interference feature. Another reason why, the lack of transparency. I have sent correspondence to the Attorney General. I just want to know who's on the Jack Smith team.
And he's not getting answers. Do you want to see other lawmakers join Matt Gaetz in this legislation?
Well, yeah, I do think defunding Jack Smith. What are the tools available to Congress to rein in out of control and prosecutors at the federal level abusing their power? It's the power of the purse.
Yes.
And and certainly we've asked for the names of Jack Smith's team. They've told us it's a secret, and we're in federal court over it.
How could it be a secret?
And
how could that be a secret? How could the public be kept from that information?
Well, they pretend there's a privacy interest in these senior prosecutors trying to jail a president for the first time in history, and we all know why they want to keep it secret, because almost certainly their Democrats are connected to Democrats, donors to Democrats, or activists from the left, and
yes,
they don't want that coming out to further undermine their Get Trump jihad.
At least one of them, the ABC News cobbled together a list of some of the people they know are on the team, and at least one of the men is a Biden donor. He donated to Joe Biden in 2020. He's on Jack Smith's team, and again, this is in a normal country, that person would have to recuse himself from such an investigation, and yet here he is, a primary player in the persecution of Joe Biden's top political opponent.
And in the end, it's Joe Biden's problem, right? Or it's his responsibility. So he's going to let his Justice Department, he can shut this prosecution down. He can shut down the prosecution of Trump in Florida, but he's chosen not to. And complicity equals collusion in my view here, and Joe Biden's ultimately responsible for this. So Jack Smith wouldn't be able to do it. Garland wouldn't be able to do it if Biden didn't say, you go ahead and you prosecute my opponent, as if that's normal, as if that doesn't have international ramifications. What does Putin think? What do our allies think when they see the leading candidate for the presidency being threatened with arrest again? They recognize it, but they don't recognize it as the American way. They recognize it as, America's lost its way.
It also is kind of a commentary on what they think the American right is willing to tolerate, isn't it? When they keep pursuing things like this. My view is that it's very destabilizing for our country. So if Joe Biden was trying to quote, heal our country, be the unity guy, as he promised in his inauguration, wouldn't he drop these charges or often offer some sort of blanket pardon for Trump so that they can't be pursued at all? And yet we're not getting that. They're not trying to bring the temperature down. They're only trying to lift it.
No, I think there's a rising communist cadre within the Democratic Party and the left board here in Washington, D.C. And so the typical rules of behavior, respect for our separation of powers and the Constitution and the civil rights of your political opponents, all of that, they don't feel any need to follow or pretend to follow those rules anymore. So I think these are dangerous times for our republic. And I just hope cooler heads prevail.
Yes.
Because this is how you lose a republic.
No question.
We don't want to turn into, I don't know. I can't think of a comparable major power that does this other than China and Russia. I really can't.
Yes, and those of us who want to see our republic defended should stand up for it, I think, because it's worth preserving and keeping. And boy, these guys can't be thrown out of office soon enough. Tom Fitton, really appreciate your time today, as always. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
You're welcome, Vince. Thank you.
Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch. I mentioned Michael Beschloss, who is supposed to be a historian. He was on MSNBC with former Republican Congressman Joe Scarborough, MSNBC host this morning, talking about how Trump is actually the real dictator. Trump is the tyrant because he has promised that if he gets into office that he will fire deadweight and corrupt federal employees, that he will remove people who are subverting our republic from those jobs, which, last I checked, if you make a promise during a presidential campaign and then our republic votes for you with the expectation that you'll keep that promise, and then you subsequently do, that is the preservation of our republic. It's the way it works. The voters render a judgment about what they want, and then you deliver. This is not subversive. This is out in the open. This is him saying, this is how I'm going to manage the government. This is how MSNBC interprets it.
If you love Mussolini, you will love what Donald Trump is talking about for 2025. Mussolini followed the unitary executive theory, too, which meant total power to the dictator, no constraints. This is about as un-American, I think you will all agree, as anything I've ever heard.
What is he talking about? First of all, he's misinterpreting the unitary executive theory. And secondly, think about this. Like, are they saying that the executive branch, is Trump saying that the executive branch can make up any law at once? No. Is he saying that the executive branch can just decide that it's going to pay for a program that it doesn't have congressional authorization to pay for? No, he's not saying that. That has nothing to do with any of this. No, in fact, that's Biden who does that. Biden makes up programs and says that he will pay for them without any congressional authorization whatsoever. What do you think the student loan bribe was? That's Biden trying to give away tens of billions of dollars that nobody said he could, hundreds of billions of dollars that nobody authorized him to do. You want to talk about a guy who has no respect for the other branches of government? It is Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., Bucko the Third, or whatever his name is. It's that guy. It's that guy. And Michael Beschloss was like, Trump, he's basically Mussolini. He wants to take the executive branch and do whatever he wants and run roughshod over everybody's civil liberties. No, that's your guy, Michael Beschloss.
I mean, the reason why this country was founded was as a rebuke to the British king.
Oh my God.
We wanted to develop a system where you could not have a king. You could not have a dictator.
Right.
Power was under constraint.
Yes.
When you were at Tuscaloosa, Joe, I'm sure that you talked about, as you have ever since, the fact that there are checks and balances, three branches of government.
Right.
That's all James Madison, who used to be a conservative hero. Now comes along Donald Trump, the first major candidate in American history to say outright, I want a presidential dictatorship.
Now, let me add a fact check to this. Donald Trump has never said outright that he wants a presidential dictatorship. When you say the word outright, what that means is he said something explicitly. He said, I want a presidential dictatorship. Quote, end quote, I want a presidential dictatorship. Donald Trump has never said those words. He's never said anything even approximating those words. You just made that up. So in other words, you are not an historian. You are a lying hack. I'm just seeing this. Apparently, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin told Fox News that he is very upset with Tommy Tuberville in Alabama for blocking these promotions for senior officers, for general officers, in order to stop all of the abortion that's going on using American taxpayer dollars. And he's upset about this. He accuses Tuberville of thrilling our adversaries. They must be very happy with Tommy Tuberville. What a scumbag this guy is. Just absolutely wrecking the military, leading to the actual destruction of human life, and then accuses a Republican senator who's standing for virtue and decency of collaborating with our enemies. These people are awful. They really are. You know who's good at diagnosing all of this? The great one, Mark Levine. He's up next here on WMAL.